Okay, we got us a manual converted Maserati Quattroporte 5 to be exact. Um, Very similar to the Ferrari conversions. Um, there's a shifter, clutch pedal that's added, some linkages to the transmission. I'd like to show you a hill start over here. So let's get stopped here on the hill. So you can slip the clutch basically as much as what you want. So let me start by talking about the clutch pedal. That's, I think, maybe the easiest portion of the conversion. So the pedal box is the same part as a Ferrari 599 and a 612. So there's a place for the clutch pedal in the pedal box. There's also a place on the brake fluid reservoir to hook up the master cylinder to the clutch. So the clutch is made from laser cut steel plates and some tubing, mainly that, and so that's a custom fabricated part. It's zinc plated, as are basically all the other steel components of the conversion. The master cylinder is mounted to the firewall with a custom-made mount. There's a plate that bolts onto the back of the inside of the firewall. You need to loosen up the pedal box a little bit to be able to slip that plate in. 4 holes need to be drilled into the firewall. There's 3 M8 studs that go through the firewall to hold the master cylinder mount in place, and then there's a 1.5 inch hole that's drilled with a hole saw for the shaft to come through. I've got a jig that bolts on to where the brake booster bolts onto. So you need to remove the brake master cylinder and the brake booster, and then the jig bolts on there, and so you get the holes lined up in the right place. The holes on the jig are you drill 1/8 of an inch or 3mm holes first, and I found that the jigs are basically better at holding a small drill bit, so it doesn't wander. A larger drill bit had a tendency to wander, and so the holes ended up in slightly wrong places. So with a small hole, and then you just enlarge it in a couple of steps to a 8.5, 9mm bolts. The jig does have a 1.5 inch hole so that you could directly use the hole saw on it. The master cylinder is a universal race car part, so those are easy to get. The inlet hose is just the brake fluid hose, and then the pressure side that goes to the bell housing for the clutch is that's a custom made part. The shifter has been custom made. It's mainly the critical parts of the shifter are CNC machined aluminum, so like the main part of the tower, and then the pivot, and then the bottom of the handle, which actually goes back and forth. Those are CNC machined. The base of it is fabricated from laser cut plates that are welded together and then zinc plated. The extension that's on the top of the tower, it's got a stainless steel frame that's also fabricated from laser cut plates, and then the covers these are plastic, and the plastic covers are maybe not so fancy and flashy, but these are basically the standard covers that come with it, and the standard gates. They can be made in a couple of different colors. So like I have a color, a brown that somewhat matches this the interior color. The reverse switch that's mounted to the shifter, there's a pigtail that ties into that, and it ties into the same wiring as the previous shift selector lever, and so you don't need to run new wires. Those wires run from here in the shifter back to the trunk. In the trunk, the wires do need to be cut and soldered, but at least over here in the console, it's basically a plug and play thing. The shifter, the top of the shift tower fits through the hole for the old selector lever. So the outside of the shift, or the center console, does not need to be touched. The AC ducts that are inside the center console that feed the rear seat vents do need to be taken out. Like, that's an unfortunate thing, and the shifter's just right in the way of one of them. The other one that feeds the B-pillar mounted vent for the back on the driver's side, I've got a tube here that's made out of ABS plastic that feeds the B-pillar. The floor vents for the back also work. So it's only the two vents that are in the center console, and then the passenger side B-pillar mounted vent that are eliminated. All the front vents are not changed. The shift actuator, that it's basically it is a custom piece. It's also CNC machined from aluminum, and there's a stainless steel shaft in it. That's also custom. And then obviously the outside linkages are custom made too, and the linkages are those are laser cut and tube welded, zinc plated. Everything, all the shafts and pivots, those kind of parts have bushings in them, so that, and the bushings are standard sizes, so that you can potentially, well, you can source them from like these industrial places like Granger or McMaster Car. The cables are custom made for this, but they just use Heim joints or rod ends that are also available commercially very easily. Some of the other or the standard parts on like Ferraris they use plastic custom molded ends, which are difficult to source. So basically anybody who makes cables should be able to make a push-pull cable for the shifter. The kind of large parts of the shifter and all the other parts are things that I would not expect to be wearing out, and so those are things that should should basically last the lifetime of the car. And so you just change the bushings, possibly the shafts. For the clutch pedal, I provide two types of shafts. One is similar to like a Ferrari 612 that's got grooves, and then there's retainer clips that clip it or keep it from moving on both ends. And because you cannot get the pedal box completely out, it's really a pain to use those clips. So I think most people would prefer using it's just a clamp that holds the shaft in place. For the actuator on the transmission, you do need to take the shift finger from the the F1 or Cambio Corsa actuator, and then the cage that goes inside it. I've been trying to keep the cost of the kit low, or as low as reasonably possible without affecting quality. So I'm trying to use or put money into like CNC machine parts where it makes sense, but not where it doesn't make sense. So the shift finger that's in the inside the in the actuator, that's one of those parts that can be removed from it and reused, and that would be a kind of difficult part to engineer and pick the steels and get all the heat treatments right so that it lasts. So that part is removed from the hydraulic actuator. The ECU or the engine controller needs to be programmed or reprogrammed. And Trev 360, who's done a lot of the Ferrari conversions, has changed the programming on this one. All the electronics are not yet figured out, and so there is a system programmed and then transmission error. Tricks that seem to work on Ferraris with the similar architecture do not seem to work on this car. So that's something that I'm still working on. There is a kind of a sledgehammer approach of replacing the whole dashboard with a new digital dash, but I have not sourced that yet, but that is one option. The engine controller is basically happy, and like the emission tests that check to make sure that all the OBD2 stuff is happy passes over here in Texas. I am not sure if it would pass in places like California though. Wiring wise, the starter relay needs to be rewired, and that's done that can be done in the trunk. So one wire needs to be ran not into the transmission controller but to the ground. And then also there's wires that need to be changed. I believe 4 different wires for the reverse switch. And after the reverse switch is working, the backup lights work, the passenger side mirror folds down, and then this car's got the proximity sensors in the bumpers, so those also work. can skip gears relatively easily. So like that was 2 to 4. And the engine's got an okay amount of torque for like, this is like 38 miles an hour, like 1500 RPM in 6th gear, and it behaves okay. And obviously it's not gonna accelerate fast, but like you can kind of cruising at 40 miles an hour, you can be in 6th gear and it doesn't feel like the engine is lugging. So now we are 35 miles an hour, and if you give it gas, it starts to accelerate. I'm just giving it a little bit. I'm under the impression that the Cambio Corsa system, it basically at low RPMs it really likes to slip the clutch, which is obviously terrible for the clutch life. So that kind of changes that. And then also backing up, you control the slip. So the shift tower, the riser is, like I said, this is made out of plastic. I do plan to offer an optional, and also it can be updated later after the kit's installed in just a couple of minutes. Basically a tower extension that's gonna be most likely the aluminum, maybe stainless steel, and it's gonna replace the whole box here. But that's gonna be an optional thing, again, to try to keep costs down, like for the standard kit. The clutch pedal feels okay. It doesn't seem like it's overly heavy. I've driven the car, I don't know, like 45 minutes, an hour at a time, and in basically city. And yeah, of course you have to operate the clutch, but it's not that bad. I went through some revisions of the clutch pedal that were way too heavy, and so this doesn't feel too heavy to actually use. First and second gear are they're geared relatively close to each other, and so quite often I will shift from first to third, skipping second. Also the final gearing is such that the engine speed is pretty high at highway speeds. This car is a 2005, and it's before the final ratio was changed on these transmissions, so most likely, or I kind of plan to change the transmission to a newer type transmission that's got that'll drop the engine RPM at highway speeds a little bit. And this is not something that the conversion did. This was an annoying thing even before I started the conversion. The shift balls can be changed. The ones that I have right now are just white and then black, but there's those can be ordered in several different colors. The gate can be it's basically solid or almost solid plastic, and so it can be sanded down to a smoother finish, and you could also paint it if that's kind of what you want. So the service parts, I guess, that's something that's a potential concern for people, and I think I already mentioned that I've tried to make it so that the wear items such as bushings or heim joints, cables are all easy to order, and so it should not be difficult to service this using parts from industrial supply houses. If needed, or if you want, if a customer wants, I could also put together kind of a rebuild kit going through all the bushings and any shafts that might wear out, so that you could potentially have the rebuilt parts for freshening up everything. For installing and removing the clutch pedal pin, the pin has got an M5 hole in the end of it, and I provide a tool it's just a 1/2-inch rod that threads into it, and that allows you to get the clutch pedal pin in and out a lot easier than if you didn't have the tool, because you can be kind of rough with the tool, and so you can pull it out with pliers or tap it slightly with a hammer. I also provide tools for disconnecting the brake pedal from the brake booster rod, and then also attach it back in. There's the 2 guides for the holes for the cables, and then the master cylinder mount, and then also on the shift actuator that's on the side of the transmission, there's 2 bushings inside that, and I provide tools for getting those in and out. And you can use just a C-clamp to get the bushings installed, and then the other tools can be tapped gently with a hammer to get the bushings out. The end of the actuator housing where the shaft does not come out is sealed with just an aluminum plate and an O-ring. The actuator itself gets sealed to the side of the transmission with silicone, and that's basic. That's how the factory seals that. For the initial kind of getting everything set in place, it's I prefer not installing the shifter and having the shifter next to the transmission, and adjust all the linkages to where the gears work okay, and then after that disconnect one end of the cables and then install the shifter into place. I mean, you could install the shifter and then make all the adjustments one time, but it's a little bit easier to be able to try to go through all the gears when the transmission is right next to the or the shifter and transmission are next to each other. The cable pass-through is high temperature resistant plastic discs that have 2 grooves inside them, and so that holds the cables nicely on that single hole that's drilled with a hole saw. And that's got a gasket. Also the firewall mount does a gasket for the master cylinder. Steering column covers, I've changed them to newer cars covers that don't have the flappy paddle holes in them. And you don't have to take the flappy paddles out, but that's just something that I thought was a clear thing to do. You can start the car from a standstill. So if you go into first gear, you don't have to step on the gas. Completely still, and just kind of slowly let the clutch out. Go into second gear and slowly let the clutch out. Like, it's all kind of okay in third gear, doing this, like no gas. Fourth gear is maybe a little bit more than what it likes, but the engine's able to run without touching the gas. Like, you could even skip to fourth. So engine speed now is at 1,000 RPM, 1100, and like, obviously this is not asking the engine to do a whole lot, just kind of puddling around. Maybe a little bit smaller gear, but now it's at 1500 RPM. But basically the transmission, my impression is that you can run the engine at a lower RPM, and you don't have to drive quite as aggressively as what you do need to drive with the Cambio Corsa system in order to prevent the clutch from slipping. I have found it very satisfying to be able to roll my own gears rather than use the flappy paddles.